Ghost Rider, The Ghost Anomaly. Chapter 1. Prologue. The Nona Tower. The sparkling lights of Tokyo City shone brightly against the black, rainy night. Rain gushed heavily and soaked the rooftop of the Nona Tower. Thunder roared, deafeningly, on the city sky and lightning flashed sharply, for a second, revealing a shadow of a man that stretched along the surface of the tower's helipad. A man was standing on the edge of the helipad, dangerously. He was clothed in a black, leather jacket that was soaked from the rain and drenched black, distressed pants. The man possessed a blonde hair and heavenly blue eyes. His face bare a sad lost frown. It's over. But even if so I will never escape it. The man slowly looked up the sky and closed his eyes and felt the brutal deluge of rain hitting his face. I'm going back to hell, for I am its king. He muttered in a depressing tone as he resigned to his hellish fate. Johnathon Blaze, a new voice of a man, along with the crackle of thunder, burst from behind him. The man, named Johnathon Blaze, wasn't startled. Took you long enough, Arida. He turned to face the new arrival. The new man stood a couple of meters away from him. He was clothed in a jacket of PSB and a standard inspector uniform underneath it. His hands clasped around his Dominator gun which glowed in blue-green. Johnathon Blaze slowly made a sad, peaceful, smile at him. You're late, Arida. Sadly I already choose a path to take, and you and your friends wouldn't like it. Johnny Blaze said in a defeated manner that made Arida frowned. Then Johnny, you know what will happen next, right? Arida's Dominator rang and began to dictate. Crime coefficient, 999. Enforcement mode, lethal eliminator. Please aim carefully and eliminate the target. The Dominator changed into something menacing but Johnny only stared at it and didn't react. Ah, the eyes of your can opener god. The man then let out a light laugh which then changed into a demonic one. Johnny's skin began to melt. Flames sprouted beneath his black boots and spiraled upwards. His clothes began to change into something charred and scorched as if he came out from hell. The skin on his face ebbed away, revealing his blackened skull which was engulfed in fire. A pair of flaming red ember, which serve as Johnny's eyes, stared down at Arida. Well then, judge me boy. Judge the Ghost Rider, the king of hell. The Ghost Rider roared in hell like at the inspector whose face was still and plain. I have seen you many times like that, Johnny, and I know what you want. Slowly he made a triumphant smile at him and said, with pleasure then, Ghost Rider. Somewhere in hell. Hell was an unholy place. It was nothing but a barren desert. A wasteland filled with monsters and horrifying nightmares. In this doomed realm, a powerful being that rides on along its cruel surface, lived and reigned. This realm was the realm of the spirit of vengeance, the Ghost Rider. Ugh. A low painful moan escaped from the lips of Johnny Blaze as he heaved for air. He was kneeling on the hot red sand, beneath a tree and the scorching red sun. Snake-like black chains were wrapped around his upper body. You should kill me now, you've just ousted me. He rasped the words in a defeated manner. Hell's yours and you took my spirit of vengeance out of my body. I have nothing now. He slowly made a beaten grin and looked up to the man who was holding the end of the chains, in front of him. The man was wearing a black leather jacket and pants. His flaming skull shifted at Johnny's pitiful face. No, the man muttered, earning him a displeased frown from Johnny. His black boots took a step forward and leveled his eyes at Johnny. It's not that simple, Johnny. You and the spirit of vengeance will never be apart. Johnny's eyes turned icily at him. What do you mean? It's already out of me. I have nothing now. I am just me. He barked the words. Anger rose from his insides. No, the man answered plainly again as he stood up and took out an object from his jacket pocket. The object glinted to Johnny's eyes and it was an ancient gold medallion. Your punishment starts now, Johnny. I will send you to a place where beings like us don't exist. The former Ghost Rider widened his eyes in terror. Johnny's life was all nothing but horror. After he was tricked by a demon to make a deal with him, his life becomes hell. Monsters, demons, and even angels hunted him down and he bare it all until he usurped the throne of hell. And now that he was going to be punished for making a single big mistake, for the first time in his life, he didn't know what he will do. He felt lost and completely crushed. I am sorry. Johnny lowered his head and closed his eyes in shame. For I'd failed you. He added as the man tightened his right hand around the chain necklace of the golden medallion. Yes, you should be. The Ghost Rider then kneeled and whispered to his ears. Now go. 7 years later, Las Vegas, Nevada, Earth, 2 ###. Johnathon Blaze stood on top of a hill. He looked straight ahead on the remains of a city. The ruined city of Las Vegas loomed over him. The massive and tall skeletal skyscrapers groaned loudly from their own heavy weights. The streets were littered with wrecked and abandoned cars. Life had already been extinguished from this place. Just like this Las Vegas, every city that I visited in this earth was either dead or had turned into a war zone. Johnny recalled the places that he had been to after he arrived. All of them were in chaos. This earth is just like hell. There's no longer a good place that I could settle down. Except for one. He fixed his ragged brown cloak around his shoulders and sighed heavily. There are no demons here too, which means there's no reason for a Ghost Rider to exist here, on this earth. A shabby grin formed in his face. Looks like he was right. My eternal punishment. Lonely exile. And Japan is the only place where I could do that. He muttered to himself and resumed walking towards the city. 6 months later, somewhere near the coast of Japan, in the middle of a typhoon. If there's one thing that Johnny would know about his life was that he would always find himself in a dreadful pinch. The ship that he was in swayed from right to left, violently, as waves hampered and pushed its hull. Johnny was on the deck, helping the crewmen of the ship on securing the cargoes that might fell to the dark ocean. He grunted as he tightened the chains around the cargo. All set here, he shouted to a crewman beside him and turned around. His eyes caught something that made him stop on his tracks. Oh shit! He exclaimed as a tall wall of water emerged from the darkness. And before Johnny could react, he was swept by the gigantic wave that hit the deck, where he was standing on. Of course, it wouldn't be that easy. Johnny cursed under his breath and watched as the ship he was in began to turn and capsized. His hands tackled the cold Pacific water as he tried to stay afloat on the surface. He caught a sight of a floating wooden crate and swam towards it. He wheezed for air as he grabbed on the floating crate and rested his head on his forearm. Damn it! He cursed again as he felt several sharp twinges on his chest, back, and ribs. He felt something warm and flowing on his left temple and knew that it was blood. He must have hit his head on one of the cargoes before he fell to the water. Give me a break, at least let me give some peace. He groaned in protest before his eyes began to give away. Suddenly the sound of the abysmal wind was cut by a loud mechanical noise. Johnny tried to look up but he felt weak. Ugh! He winced after someone grabbed him by his arms and lifted him up. Who are you? The ascent suddenly stopped and Johnny found himself inside a helicopter. The mechanical sound was much louder this time. His eyes opened weakly and glanced to his left after he heard a voice. Passenger secured? Roger that. That was a nice jump, Kagami. Did you enjoy the water? It was a woman's voice and a man answered her back. Come on, can't you see that he needs help? His voice was sharp. Johnny tried to move his head more but the man's face loomed over him. Don't move. You're hurt, badly. The man, whose name is Kagami, had black wet hair and sharp eyes. His voice was deep and menacing to him. Now then, who are you? The man asked him but Johnny felt very weak. He slowly closed his eyes and breathed calmly. At least he was safe, for now. Soft. Johnathon felt his back was pressed against something soft. Cold and quiet, his senses slowly came back. The coldness crept into his skin and his ears heard the low humming of an air condition accompanied by relaxing piano music. He opened his blue eyes and saw the white ceiling above him. Where am I? He glanced to his right and saw an advanced-looking BP monitor, standing beside his bed. His nose caught a strong disinfectant smell. He was inside a hospital. Right, I was rescued last night. His thoughts were cut when the door opened and a nurse entered. She stopped when she saw the man. Oh, you're awake, she said in Japanese language. Oh no, can't he understand Japanese? He said in a calm manner and shook his head. The nurse stared and smiled, understanding what he meant. She bowed at him and exited the room. Did she understand me? I hope so. Johnny had been to Japan before, but not the Japan of this world, and that memory was from a long time ago. He had already forgotten how to speak the language. The door opened again, interrupting his thoughts. The same nurse entered again and this time she was accompanied by two persons, a man and a woman. That man. Johnathon recognized the man standing beside the woman. He was wearing a black jacket with bold letters MOFA written on the sleeve, his pants were black and his hair was jet black. His grey eyes turned observant the second he saw Johnathon. Scary. Johnathon thought warily as the woman with shoulder-length, blonde hair, approached him with a smile. Good morning, she said in a fluent English and it made Johnathon breathe serenely. At least she speak my language. Hello, you have a rough evening, yesterday. The woman sat down and then introduced herself. My name is Frederica Hanashiro, Assistant Officer of Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Suppressing Action Department. She then glanced at the man. And he is Shinaya Kagami, one of my agents. Foreign Affairs, oh no. Johnathon had planned to migrate, illegally, to Japan. He was supposed to avoid the authorities, like the enforcer in front of him, and hide within the city if the ship had docked successfully, but since it didn't he was now in another pinch. He glanced at the Kagami. The man was looking at something on his left wrist. A small device with a hologram screen. That's a video, this is interrogation. You're going to arrest me for entering your country, illegally, am I right? He asked and the woman's eyes widened for a second before she spoke. I'm glad you're catching up. Yes, but it depends. She crossed her leg and then asked him, what's your name? Johnathon rummaged his mind while he shifted his eyes back to Frederica. Johnathon Blaze. Most people call me Johnny. The woman hummed as her eyes lightened a bit. Well, Johnny, how many were you on the ship? She asked Johnny and the man explained. Other than him there were at least 160 illegal immigrants inside the ship. All of them were escaping the civil war in America. Johnny weaved the story to the woman, some are lies and some are truth, while he remained vigilant to Kagami. The man hadn't uttered a single word yet to him. He was still looking at the small hollow screen on his wrist. And that's where I end. Johnny finished his story and Frederica only made a single nod. So your previous job was at a circus, performing deadly motorcycle stunts, and then you quit and volunteered for the army. First half is true, second half is lie. Yes, Johnny said with honesty. For 7 years I fought as a volunteer soldier. But I guess I can't prove it now, because all of my stuff was now at the bottom of the ocean. You're correct, Frederica said in a friendly manner. But not all. Johnny finally heard the man again. He glanced at him and grinned. Oh, finally he speaks. Kagami smiled at his remark and took out an object from his pocket. It was a gold medallion. Johnny's eyes became rigid. Oh, thank you. This is a memento from my friend. He took the medallion and stared at with sad, reminiscing smile. After an hour of interrogation, Frederica and Kagami bid farewell to him. Apparently Johnny would be transferred into another facility called Civil Immigration Reformation Center tomorrow. A facility dedicated to teach immigrants on how to be a good citizen of civil society, and there he will live as an immigrant under probation for 1 year. Johnny stood inside his bathroom and stared at the gold medallion hanging on his chest. Its surface glinted at the mirror. I finally have what I want and I don't care if I have to wait, he said, somberly. But I can't seem to get rid of you, he thought with disappointment. The medallion was given to him by the new king of hell, the Ghost Rider who banished him from hell. Johnny then shifted his gaze at his reflection. He was back to normal, he was fully human again. I'll try to live as a human being until I die. He smiled with determination to himself and walked out of his bathroom. It was already nighttime and he decided to call it a day. You seem to be very silent today, Kagami, Frederica observed as she glanced beside her. The man looked outside and watched as tall, futuristic skyscrapers jutted out before him after the car entered an elevated highway. I was observing his psychopath hue. He pressed the device on his left wrist and pressed a button. He said that he was a stuntman turned soldier, right? He asked as he looked through several holoscreen. Yes, and what? Did you notice something wrong? Frederica asked again and Kagami answered. Being a stuntman and a soldier for 7 years should have taken a toll to his mind. Not to mention he was the only survivor of the Aurora, the immigrant ship. It should have clouded his psyche more. Kagami then turned to Frederica. His psychopath hue was white all along. In fact, Sybil had just discovered a new type of color white based on his hue. Oh, what hue would that be? Kagami looked at the highway in front and his eyes hardened. Heavenly white. Silence filled the automatic car as Frederica absorbed Kagami's words. If that is so, then I would leave it to the Cid. She then made an amused smirk before adding, your Akane would definitely catch something up on Johnny. Kagami frowned and looked away while he mumbled. Me and Akane aren't really like that, you know. Chapter 2, Case 1-1 Chapter 1. Case 1-1, the Oda Bridge Incident. Hell. The empty throne of hell stood at the edge of a ravine that overlooks a large boiling lake. Dust and sands had settled on the surface of the throne, indicating that it hasn't been used for a long time. Everything is ready. Away from the throne, kneeling on the red sand was the Ghost Rider. His head hung low and his eyes were directed towards the ground. He will be awakened. Now how will Johnny fare in this world? He then slowly raised his head and rose from the ground. How will the world, governed by hard logic and heartless reasoning, react to the Ghost Rider? He slowly stride towards the throne and touched the armrest. Shall we find out? He muttered as the blaze around his skull burns brightly more. 1 year later, Immigration Reformation Center, swimming pool area. 30. Johnny exclaimed as he burst out of the water and rested his head over the edge of the pool. He puffed his breath and swept his blonde hair up away from his face. It's been 1 year and today is my release. A pleasant grin etched from his face. Today was the final day of his probation. He would finally leave this place and live as an official citizen of this country. He climbed up to the edge and walked towards a table where his towel and device are put. He pressed a button on his device and a message automatically played. Good morning immigrant, no #111, Johnathon Blaze. The civil system would like to congratulate you for completing the Reformation and Naturalization program. As of now, your psychopath is recorded, stored and monitored by the Ministry of Welfare and Public Safety Bureau. Monitored? Guess I still need to watch out for myself, huh? He reminded himself as the message continued. The Ministry of Housing and Development had also prepared a standard tenement home for you. The address is listed below. Johnny carefully memorized the address below before he switched the device off. Now then, I must prepare, he said and cast an excited smile. After attending to his final checkup and signing a couple of papers, Johnny stood on a bus stop and waited for a bus. A bus arrived which he immediately rode on. He looked out of the window as the bus moved and then his eyes widened in wonder. So Japan had become so advanced in this world, he pondered in astonishment as the bus rose to an elevated highway and the breathtaking view of the city greeted him. He observed more in marvel. Civil system. In this world, Japan's law enforcement was under and managed by a government organization called Civil System. They worked hand in hand with the national government to handle and manage crimes. Johnny rested his head on his seat and recalled all of the things he learned from the IRC, Immigration and Reformation Center. And they do it with the massive, high-tech surveillance system of the MWPSB. He reflected and smirked. Man, if George Orwell sees this he'll panic and die. After an hour Johnny stepped down from the bus and looked in front of him. An old, decaying and tall, apartment-style building stood before him. His eyes inspected the tenement building with scrutiny. Well, they did say it was a tenement apartment. Johnny forced himself to smile, but it was a deadpan one. He then turned around and looked across the street where a large black gate stood. A large hologram sign lit up above it and it displays Happy Family Park and Zoo in bright neon orange lights. Well, at least there's a zoo, haha. He tired to uplift his spirits but he let out a disgruntled sigh. Apartment, 1408. Shit. Johnny uttered a single word with a still poker face after he found his designated apartment unit. After he opened the door of his unit he immediately saw the kitchen area on his left. There was a door standing on his right and when he opened it he saw that it was the bathroom. Further into his room his eyes landed on a small table, and then further from that, standing by the wall, was a sliding door. He opened it and saw a neatly folded futon which will be his bed and drawers where he could put his clothes. This room is so small, he exclaimed in disenchantment. He sat down and rested his left hand on the table and pressed the device on his wrist again. Welcome to your lovely home. I am Taro Komisachan. A cartoonish-looking mascot pop out and smiled cheerfully at Jonathan's frowning, discontented face. Lovely home my ass. He mentally cursed and the hologram continued. I am now syncing to your home system. Syncing complete. Komisachan, the official mascots of Sybil system. They're composed of two mascots, Taro and Hanako-chan. Taro is the male and Hanako is female. Johnny observed the small hollow mascot as it looked around his apartment. I've detected that you don't have food. May I suggest for you to buy some? He glanced at small refrigerator and then swiped at his hollow screen. I was given an ample amount of money, why not? He said and stood up, but Taro spoke again. Oh no, it seems you don't have much clothes. May I suggest for you to buy dash? No thank you. Does the system know that I have a small and limited budget? He exclaimed and thought, irritably, but he looked around his room again. So this is where I will live in exile. The thought of living in peace glided in his mind and it made him smile in satisfaction. I guess I'll manage here. Oh, it looks like a nearby supermarket has promo for immigrant dash. Okay, I'm leaving, he exclaimed at Taro before he strode out of his unit. Supermarket. I guess this should be alright. Johnny glanced down to his basket. I don't really need much today. He pushed his cart and examined several items on the shelves. Seafoods are expensive, meat is cheap but it was synthetic and vegetables are still yucky. Maybe I should ask Taro for tips. He was about to press the device on his wrist again when he stopped on his tracks. He was standing on the hardware section and his eyes caught something. It was a meter-long chains. No, I don't need it. He eyed the chain with contemplation. Ghost Rider is gone. He's never coming back. He murmured, solemnly, under his breath and proceeded to check out. Apartment, 1408. It was already nighttime when Johnny opened the door of his unit. The man quickly closed the door behind him and put his groceries on his table. He blew hard and slumped down by the wall and pressed his device again. Why did I even bought that chain? He grumbled as he stared hard on the grocery bags where the chains are. Taro, please open the T.V. If there's TV, he asked with skepticism, and a medium-size hologram appeared. A news report filled his room and the man watched as a scene unfolds on his screen. We're now reporting live of a highway robbery car chase in highway no #### dash. Johnny blinked, startled to see two armored trucks running hastily along an elevated highway. Chasing behind them were a line of police droids and a single police car. I thought there's no crime here in Japan. His eyes hardened, stunned to the news. Well, I guess there's no such thing as perfect place. Disappointed, he clicked his tongue and looked away. Ugh, then his chest spasmed. Johnny slumped to the floor, eyes widening in shock. What juza? A burst of burning pain crawled all over his body and the man convulsed as he struggled to stand up. Johnny raced to the bathroom and looked at the mirror above the sink. Trails of smoke came out of his nose, his mouth, and his ears while the gold medallion on his chest glowed in bright orange ember, showing a symbol that the man had never seen before. No, it can't be. I Ghost Rider should be. Oh Johnny, I was never gone. A dark voice escaped his lips as the man let out a loud scream. Flames burst out of his eyes and his skin began to melt away. The fire ate his white shirt and was replaced by black leather jacket with 3 spikes on both shoulders. Warning, warning, your psychopath has suddenly dash. Johnny, now overwhelmed by the Ghost Rider, pressed the button on his device. The hollow mascot sizzled and changed into something sinister. Instead of a happy face it has become a small menacing skull. The word shit was written on its forehead. Become fucking cool, it also roared in deep, demonic voice. Damn right, he laughed in a devilish tone and strode out of the bathroom and let out another scream. All those years of silence, I'm finally free. His glowing fiery eyes leered at the hollow T.V. It still shows the high-speed robbery car chase. Naughty, naughty. He grasped the words brutally before he opened the door of his unit. He stood outside and loomed over the view in front of him. No bike. Must improvised. A low heavy chuckle escaped from within him as he stared down at the zoo, across from his apartment. 45 minutes ago, MWPSB, Office of Division 1. Inspector Arida yawned loudly and looked at the commute device on his left wrist. Arida, do you really need to yawn like that? The fluffy brown-haired inspector answered to his friend with a groggy voice. Sorry, Key. I just woke up from a long nap. Get a hold of yourself. Today is your last day as a night duty inspector. Next week we will have a proper schedule. Kay reminded him with a stern face and the inspector responded with smirk. I know, which is why I'll try my best tonight. He smiled, goofily, and it only earned him a loud irritated grunt from Kay. Just be careful, okay? And don't do any mental trace. He warned with hard voice, but Arida only flashed a grin on him. Sure thing, Kay. I promise you that. He pressed the device, ending the conversation with his friend, and walked out of the elevator. Inside the office, there are other two people. Enforcer Kazumichi Irie glanced his dark brown eyes at the door after Arida entered and he immediately called out with excitement. Hey, Inspector Sleepyhead had just arrived. The other enforcer, a man in his late 50s and sports graying hair and eyes, smirked as the inspector greeted them. Oh, Irie, that was just one time when I accidentally slept on my first night duty. And Tenma said it's okay to sleep. Enforcer Tenma Todoroki smirked more. I said it's okay, take a nap, not sleep. Arida grumbled as the enforcers ganged up on him. You too. He was about to put down his bag on his chair when a loud blaring alarm filled the room, cutting the cheerful air. What now? The computer on his desk lit up and showed a warning. Area stress level alert, Minato Ward. Arata read as his commute device rang and he answered it immediately. Oh, Arata. I'm surprised to see you awake at this hour. How many times did I sleep during my night duty? Arata wondered and immediately shrugged it off. Shinsan, what happened? 10 minutes ago our cameras detected a crime in Minato Ward. It was a bank robbery. A group of 6 highly armed men rushed inside the bank during its closing hours and stole 2 cases of hard drives. And they killed 5 people already. Inside those hard drives are millions of cryptocurrency accounts. Got it. Shinsan, continue monitoring them please. Arata said as he took his blue MWPSB jacket from his chair. Woohoo, talk about an exciting duty. Irie whistled as the brown-haired detective flung his bomber jacket on his shoulder. Oh, things just get serious. Todoroki reminded him with serious face as he put his dominator on his back holster. Everyone, let's go. Time to catch some bad guys. Arata exclaimed and readied his dominator gun. Elevated highway no. Hashtag. Shinsan, any reports from the drone above? Arata asked the analyst. He was sitting at the back of the patrol car as the 3 of them sped along the deserted highway. Just a minute. They're riding in 2 black trucks. They just hit the first barrier with ease and they're still running with great speed. They must have prepared for this. Can you predict their route? The inspector looked in front. Just give me a second. Thanks. Whoa, the car suddenly jolted to the left which shook the inspector. What the Irie, please be careful on driving. Oi, what the fuck is that? Irie pointed in front of them and Todoroki followed his shocked eyes. What the dash? His eyes widened in surprise. Arata moved forward and squeezed between the two and he too saw the horrifying sight. What on earth? In front of them, leaving behind a trail of fire, was a horse. It was galloping wildly and its legs scraped the pavement, loudly. Its head was a burning skull, its skin are charred grey-white and it was reined in by a burning chain. As for its rider, which what made the whole scene more terrifying, was a man wearing a leather jacket and black pants and combat boots. And just like his horse, his head was a burning human skull. Yeehaw, it howled demonically, snapping the petrified Arata. Shin-san, is our drone seeing this? What the hell is that? Shin shrieked from the other end of the line as she too saw the burning rider. The inspector couldn't answer her question. The rider zoomed further away from them. Shin-san, the predicted route, he called the analyst again. It looks like they are going cross Oda Bridge. I already deploy several barrier drones on the other end. They're going to escape via pier, Arata concluded and then quickly ordered. Irie, follow the burning rider. Are you kidding me? That thing could be an alley dash. Just drive, Kazumichi. Todoroki barked and the enforcer pressed the pedal to the floor, accelerating the car more. The ghost rider thundered down the highway, his horse pushed fast at a staggering amble speed. In front of them are the 2 black armored trucks. He watched as the vehicles swerved up into an elevated turnpike. The road leads to a wide arc bridge. Oda Bridge, ha. He madly scoffed and hit the rein of his horse. Let's go vendetta, he barked in a deranged way and the horse immediately zoomed in. He eventually overtaken the 2 trucks as they entered the bridge. The ghost rider glanced back, gaining his distance a bit, before he grabbed the black chains that was wrapped over his chest. His right hand began to spin wildly, stirring his chains in midair before throwing it, the end wrapped around the railings of the bridge. He then grabbed the other end and shoot it towards the other side of the bridge. He had just created a chain wire trap and the 2 trucks couldn't avoid it. He pulled the rein, stopping his horse, and watched the carnage in front of him as the first rock hit his chains and flipped forward and crashed on the pavement of the bridge. The second truck attempted to swerve but because of its large size and hasty speed it toppled down to the right and smashed at the first truck. Improvise, adapt, and overcome. The ghost rider let out a frenzied laughter. The doors of the truck opened and the 6 robbers crawled out, their rifles hung loosely from their shoulders. Most of them limp or swayed, they were all in a daze from the injuries they earned from the pileup. What the boss, what's that? One of the robbers shouted and pointed his gun. The boss, a white man, shrieked at the sight of the ghost rider. Kill him. A rain of bullets hit the ghost rider but he only stood on his ground, unfazed, with both of his hands behind him. How do I say thanks for the food in Japanese? Chains snake from both of his wrists while he pondered. Oh yes, itadakamasu. He clasped both of hands in front of him and then opened his arms wide. His chains flew towards the armed men. No, the man on the right of the ghost rider, yelped as one of the chain wrapped around his neck. The ghost rider yanked the man towards him and lifted him by his neck. I'll eat your soul. The man screamed for his life but it was immediately cut as his arms dangled to his sides and his eyes rolled back. The ghost rider threw the lifeless body away and lashed his left chain at the group. The chain hit 2 men, both exploded into fiery dust. The leader darted to his left, eyes wide from horror. Oi, call the client, he barked at the man on his right. The man took out his phone but before he could call, his head burst after the chain speared his skull. Blood sprayed everywhere. Shit, the boss said and looked to his underling on his left. Throw a grenade dash but the boss stopped in mid-sentence as the ghost rider's chain cut through his underling's neck. His head falls and blood fountained out of his open neck. Damn it dash, the leader took out his phone but he squealed as the ghost rider dashed forward and pushed him on the overturned vehicle. You shouldn't use phone while you're having your dinner, the ghost rider said in a deranged demonic voice. Please? I don't want to die Ak. The Ghost Rider tightened his grip around his neck and snarled. Then you shouldn't have killed those 5 people and robbed a bank. He moved his face closer to him and then said, now look into my eyes. Feel the same pain that you've inflicted on the innocents. The man screamed in terror, his wail of despair echoed through the bridge. Memories of his sin flashed before him and his eyes turned charcoal black. The man's voice died down and his arms hang loosely from his side. The Ghost Rider let go of the carcass of the man and stared down. Thanks for the meal. He rasped, crazily, in a mocking way. The Ghost Rider opened his arms and breathed the cold air around him. I feel alive. Flames shoot out from his mouth and onto the night sky. Embers danced along the air as the Ghost Rider felt his powers crawl over his body. Freeze, don't move. A resounding little voice of a man made him slowly turn his head to his right. He saw 3 men standing by a police car. Police, he bare his ember eyes at the man on the center, the source of the voice. I can't believe it. It's a talking skeleton. Arida blinked his flabbergasted golden eyes several times, checking if he was still dreaming. He was now standing a couple of feet away from the mysterious burning rider. Oi, Arida, call some backup. Todoroki called, fearfully. His Dominator gun shook intense. Fear was written all over his face. Yes, I already dash. Look into my eyes, Arida. The inspector didn't know how it happened. Arida let out a sharp yap as he was lifted from the ground. Hard bony fingers enclosed tightly on his neck. He gasped as he stared right into the hollow eye socket and to a pair of small orange-red ember inside, which serve as the eyes of the Ghost Rider. Hey, let him go. Irie reacted first and dashed to the Ghost Rider, his fist ready for a punch, but the burning man opened his free hand and shoot out a fireball. The enforcer was thrown to the pavement, unconscious. Son of a dash. Todoroki cursed and tried to attack, but the rider whisked his chain out and hit the old man by his chest. He was pushed to the pavement, his back made a sickening crack upon contact. No dash. Arida, while struggling to breath, pointed his Dominator right on the rider's chest. The gun scanned him. Warning: unknown biological being detected. Not subject for enforcement. Trigger is locking. What dash? How can that be? The scan sprang terror into his heart. How what are you dash? Cool gun. I want it. The Ghost Rider yanked the Dominator from Arida's hand before he threw the inspector to the hood of the car. The glass cracked as his back hit it and he let out a painful groan. The Ghost Rider then pointed the gun to the sky. Be mine. He muttered as his hellfire crawled along the surface of the Dominator. Arida watched with half-open eyes as his gun slowly transformed. The blue-green lights turned into blood red, the color of the sleek barrel changed into a something much darker than black after 3 sharp spikes pops out from the surface. Registering new user. The soft, gentle, woman voice of Sybil, which is standard to every Dominator gun, was replaced by a man with hard, malevolent tone. Your gun's cool, Ghost Rider, now start shootin'. The Ghost Rider laughed evilly. He pointed his new gun at the fallen truck. Enforcement mode, destroy decomposer. Let's destroy some stuff, bruh. The muzzle opened up and fired a single red beam. The red beam hit the truck, blowing it into smithereens. Fire rage on the pavement. Nice. The Ghost Rider remarked cheerfully. And then he pointed it at Arida. The half-conscious inspector tried to move, but the pain from his injured back had prevented him. The Ghost Rider suddenly moved and lowered his head, inches away from him, while he stick the Dominator gun at the inspector's forehead. Word of warning. Don't follow me. He emphasized each of the words with dangerous intent before he straightened himself up and walked away. Come, Vendetta. He whistled, loudly, and his horse emerged from behind the bridge's arch. The Ghost Rider took a short belittling glance at Arida and then climbed up to his horse. He slammed the rein hard and the stallion dashed and jumped off the bridge. I will rock this world. His laughter blared throughout the night and it was the last thing that Arida had heard before he closed his eyes and sleep. MWPSB, Bureau Chief's office. In the dimly lit office, sitting and reclining comfortably on her chair was the Bureau Chief of MWPSB, Harumi Hosorogi. The small old woman in her 60s was staring blankly to the blank black wall in front of her. Her gray eyes were unmoving and her breath was calm. I see. She suddenly broke the unnerving silence of her office. We've detected an anomaly. She then shifted her reclining chair and faced the person, who was sitting on one of the office chairs. The person, a man, was staring at her, quietly, with unmoved eyes. What would be that anomaly, Chief Hosorogi? The man's jet black eyes looked down in thought. Hosorogi tilted her head and made a soft smile at him. The Ghost Rider. Chapter 3, Case 1-2 Chapter 2. Case 1-2, The Oda Bridge Incident. Apartment 1408. Hot, this feeling. Johnny slowly opened his eyes and woke up soaked in his own sweat. He was sprawled all over the floor near his front door. It's so hot. He called weakly, and moved his right hand to his face to wipe off some of his sweat. Thirsty, he stood up from the floor and walked to his table. His groceries from yesterday were still unpacked and untouched. Then he stopped dead on his tracks. What the? His half-open eyes adjusted to new object lying beside his grocery bags, a black-colored gun. That's a dash? Oh no, Johnny's eyes widened in fright as he recognized the gun. A Dominator gun. But only the police can have this dash. Suddenly, the memory of the events last night flashed before his eyes. His mouth hung slightly in dread. Shit. Taro, can you check my psychopass? Taro popped out from his left wrist together with a small hollow screen. Your psychopass for today is 13, your hue index is heavenly white. Good job for Johnny breathed out in relief. At least his psychopass didn't increase due to his sudden transformation. However, I couldn't get your psychopass last night. Yesterday's data had been corrupted due to an unknown glitch. Please report dash. Yes, I will, later. Can you turn on the TV please? He knew how it was corrupted. He glanced at the hollow TV, and a news channel blared in front of him. We're now at the scene of the crime on Oda Bridge. Last night, 6 highly armed men had robbed a bank. The police force had chased them but they were too late. A man in a black leather jacket had already killed the 6 men dash. Oh no. Johnny gulped down uneasily as the voice of the reporter was drowned by his loud heartbeat. A heavy dread swirled and began to wait, uncomfortably, inside him. We don't know who the vigilante is. Johnny's thoughts were cut after a man came into view beside the reporter. The man was smart-looking and looked Russian, his hair black and parted to his right. His serious blue eyes looked right into the camera and straight into Johnny's soul. But one thing's for sure, he assaulted 1 inspector and 2 enforcers. Now that is a crime. No shit, Inspector Ivan. Johnny sighed, frustrated to what had transpired last night. He stood up and checked the Dominator gun. I guess I have to return you, huh, he said and touched the handle of the gun. Warning, unauthorized user detected. This Dominator will activate its locator dash. Johnny let go of the gun, dived his hand into one of his grocery bags, fishing out and opening a bag of potato chips. Then he took the gun again and shoved it inside. Ha dash. Aluminum foil blocks signals. Johnny exclaimed and dropped the junk food bag on the table, spilling some on the surface. My potato chips. He lamented at his wasted snack, but he only let out a disgruntled sigh over it. He reached for his right back pocket to get his handkerchief, but his hand brushed another object inside. A phone. Johnny took out and scanned the phone with a startled look. The screen was dirty and cracked, and it was wrapped in a plain black protective case. What's this dash? The phone screen suddenly turned on and a demonic seal flashed before Johnny's eyes. The seal was like a complicated Tetris block with a small cross on top and enclosed by a circle. Within the circle was the word Halfas. Halfas, one of the counts of hell. Those guys are working under him. What is he doing here in this world? He frowned in displeasure, but then another dreadful thought formed in him. What if he wasn't the only devil here in this world? The counts of hell, as long as Johnny could remember, were composed of 5 powerful demons. Furfur, Bifrons, Rom, Andromalius and Halfas, each of them were endowed with powerful legions. And all of them were loyal to Mephisto, the devil who tricked Johnny into signing a deal with him, the one who turned him into a ghost rider. Johnny stared daggers at the phone as an old and familiar rage rose up inside him. He thought he was free from his dark fate. He thought he would live in a peaceful exile. But reality was cruel and it always disappointed him. A sharp ring cut through Johnny's deep thoughts. The man glanced at the screen. Halfas flashed and it made his skin turn red in fury. He answered the phone and stood in silence. So, did you have fun with my men last night, Ghost Rider? The man's eyes flared at the deep, bellowing voice of the demon. Halfas, didn't you run away from hell together with your frat buddies after I defeated Mephisto? The demon on the other end laughed beastly. Clearly, he was mocking the Ghost Rider. This is our world now. You're not welcome here. And so, are you? Johnny berated in enmity. He heard the demon click his tongue in annoyance. Then we'll do a battle. I'll text you where I live. The line went dead and Johnny put the phone down on the table. He then walked inside the bathroom and stared at the mirror. His eyes were still heavy and filled with fury, trails of smoke whisking out of his ears and nose. He was about to transform into Ghost Rider again when his device on his wrist rang out. Warning, your psychopass has increased rapidly, tolerate, level reached. Johnny clicked his tongue in ire. He couldn't do it without the Sybil system watching him. He gnashed his teeth, hard enough for it to crack, but then he let out a long sigh which relaxed him. I'll kill him. I'll kill them all, he declared in steel tone. And after that, I'll live in peace. His grip around the sink tightened as he closed his eyes. A new, but familiar, feeling of hope had clouded his anger and Johnny had immediately held on tightly to it. New Sybil Medical Center, Tokyo. I'm sure of it, that thing could still be human, Arita said to his friend, Ki. The inspector was resting on a hospital bed. Ki Ignatov watched him with intentness. Humans don't shed their own skin completely and are still be able to walk, not to mention, except maybe, lift a heavy inspector like you, Arita. Kay countered. His humorless tone made Arita chuckle in embarrassment. Yeah, sorry about that, Kay, but you looked dashing on the TV earlier this morning. Don't change the subject here. Kay barked, irked at the inspector's aloofness. You have to remember, Kay, that this thing also attacked 2 enforcers. A cold, calculating voice cut the two. Standing by the window was the MWPSB Chief Inspector, Mika Shimatsuki. The Chief Inspector shifted her discerning eyes at Arita. And I know what I saw. He shot a fireball with his left hand, took down Ire with it, and then a long chain appeared and he whipped Todoroki with it. Arita's voice became serious and it made Shimatsuki's right brow twitch in rage. You do know that magic doesn't exist in this era. It could be a hologram. That explanation can also include his skull that is on fire. She air-quoted the last 2 words, and scoffed in disbelief. In any case, Shun and Hinakawa are still inspecting your body cam. And speaking of inspecting, she then cast a frown. Why didn't you call for backup and, not only that, you let that burning bonehead steal your Dominator? Arita sheepishly smiled at the fuming chief inspector. I'm sorry. I did call for backup and he also strangled me. His eyes suddenly widened in surprise as an idea clicked in his mind. Can I perform mental tracing now? No, the two people objected in unison. Wow, I didn't expect the two of you to object. But I need to know more about him. You don't need to know this man. What if he's deranged? He is crazy but I could still feel a bit of humanity in him. Arita cast a trusting smile. Don't worry, Kay. I will let you pull me anytime. Kay hesitated at first, glancing at the chief inspector, who only nodded. Okay, but come out quickly. Kay said as Arita put his right hand on his neck. It was raining hard today, his vision blurred into inky gray color. He found himself back on the bridge. His back was on the car and the ghost rider was on top of him, his right hand held his neck. There he is, Dominators don't work on him. He observed as the ghost rider's hand tightened more. Fire, fire, I'm on fire. He felt his skin began to degrade, painfully, then he heard the ghost rider spoke. Don't mental trace me bitch. Arita. Arita snapped back to reality as Kay pulled him by the collar of his hospital clothes. The inspector took a mouthful of breath and faced his friend with a questioning look. What happened? Your voice changed, that's never happened before. Are you okay? Kay asked him with a worried look. My voice changed, is it deep and menacing? Yes, as if the devil possessed you, Chief Shimatsuki said, unfazed at what had happened, before she added. Dominators don't work on him, huh? The inspector nodded to her and then he added. And he knows that I am mental tracing him. MWPSB. It could detect Arita's mental tracing? How was that even possible? Kay stood beside the chief inspector inside an elevator. The two were back in the building after the bureau chief called the chief inspector for an emergency meeting. I think I know what would be today's topic. Shimatsuki sighed deeply and the inspector with her asked. The bureau chief must have heard of the masked vigilante. Yeah, and he better. He's got a city to protect and to serve. He will not let some random burning bonehead vigilante ruin his cause. Burning bonehead? Kay shifted his quizzical eyes at her. What's confusing though is why he invited the MOFAs too. What? They're here too. That meant that man from the Bifrost incident case was also here. Memory of the one-year-old case played in his mind. What a bother. He murmured in a dejected manner as they reached the floor. MWPSB, conference room number 1. In the dimly lit conference room, 7 people were sitting around a long table. The air around them was heavy and tensed as some of the group were either jittered or agitated to the video that they were watching. The large screen in front of them played the surveillance video of the crime last night. They couldn't believe what they were watching right now. Word of warning. Don't follow me. Kay shivered slightly as the ghost rider neared Arita and his body cam. The footage ended and left everyone in a dead silence. That ends Arita's body cam footage, Chief Inspector Shimatsuki said. She was seated across from Frederica, the woman still staring at the image on the screen. The camera on the bridge matches with Arita's. Is he alright after this incident? He is. His psychopath is still in on a good level. But not for long, I guess. Kay shifted and glared across to Kagami, whose eyes were still locked on the screen, contemplating the skull man. Need not to worry. I'll be fine, Arita said, via camera from his laptop, with an uplifting tone. He beamed his reassuring smile through his screen beside Kay and it made Kagami grin. In any case, the man that this vigilante had killed was a suspect that we MOFAs are trailing for a while. Jinoza, if you please. Frederica called the man sitting further from her, beside Kagami. Jinoza Nobuchika stood up from his chair, his ponytailed black hair swaying as he looked at everyone with his gray eyes. His name is Rick Condor, age 30 and his nationality is Irish. He migrated to Japan 5 years ago. His hue color was yellow before it changed into dark red as his mental health deteriorated. He was suffering from depression and the civil system immediately recommended him to take prescribed drugs and therapy sessions. He paused as the screen changed and showed the robbery group leader's picture. But that was 1 year ago. He disappeared for 6 months before one of our surveillance cameras detected him. After that, we tailed him and tapped his communication device. We discovered that he was working under a person named Halfaz. Another picture appeared. This time, it was a picture of a large, stern old man with a graying beard and yellow eyes. Halfaz, Chinese-American, age 60 and an immigrant. He migrated here 17 years ago, and he lives in the Shinjuku abandoned zone. He was a mercenary with affiliations to Euro-Irish Liberation Front. Jinoza finished as Frederica added to everyone. We know he lives in the Shinjuku abandoned zone and we're monitoring him as we speak. And yet, he could send a man to rob a bank, freely. Shimatsuki thought as she crossed her arms. Why you didn't capture him yet? Kay asked in an irate manner. The man was a terrorist and yet he lived under civil system's eyes with pure freedom. Because he has a strong backer. Somehow, someone within the government is protecting him. Frederica answered with a plain tone before she added. MOFAs would have had enough evidence to put Halfaz in jail if only we got to Rick much earlier. All of the evidence was in his phone. She then turned to Arita and made an apologetic smile. We already know that Rick will escape via pier, so we set up an entrapment there, but the burning bonehead got him first, Arita said with realization. Frederica chuckled in delight. You guys really have a strong imagination when it comes to naming things. Shimatsuki's face reddened. Jinoza noticed it, so he turned his head away to hide his smirk. Ghost Rider. A voice coming from the seventh man cut the cheerful mood of the room. Everyone turned to the bureau chief, Shizuka Homura, who was sitting in the middle, with a peaceful face. He put both of his hands below his chin and calmly repeated, Ghost Rider, that will be the vigilante's official name. Kay asked him, Ghost Rider? Why that, chief? The bureau chief smiled as the video on the screen played again. This time everyone was shocked and startled as the Ghost Rider jumped on his burning horse. The horse galloped off the bridge and dashed through the surface of the river. This video came from a surveillance drone that gave chase to the rider. As you can see, he was holding a Dominator. Everyone in the room looked at him and then to the chief inspector. He stole Arida's gun. The chief inspector confirmed and gulped down intense. Wait a second. His horse ran on water. What kind of vigilante is this? Frederica was aghast to what she had just watched. And he used the Dominator gun when he blew up that truck. How did he use it? Kagami questioned Arida, but the man only shrugged. It changed when he touched my Dominator. It no longer recognized me as its user. Kagami was puzzled. Did Ghost Rider hack it? Dominators were not easy to be hacked, for it had a strong connection to the Sybil system. A hacker would have had to hack the whole system before he could manipulate one Dominator. It would take a long time. For now, I've come to a conclusion. We can't let Halfas roam freely while under Sybil's eyes. His actions must be judged and enforced by MOFA. The same can be said for the Ghost Rider. We don't know him and we don't know his intentions. The Public Safety Bureau will be the one to handle him. Chief Inspector Shimatsuki darted her appalled eyes at the bureau chief. She was flabbergasted by his decision and she wanted to shout out a strong objection. But instead, she swallowed hard and clicked her tongue mentally in dismay. MWPSB, Chief Inspector Office. We should have raised an objection, Chief. Kay said with a bitter tone at the Chief Inspector. Chief Shimatsuki only snorted hotly and swallowed a lot of mints from her mint dispenser. Then she slammed her hands at her table and argued. I would love to, but those are the bureau chief's orders. Besides, he was somehow correct. She stood up again from her chair and moved to her window. A vigilante of unknown being, and our dominators don't work with him. This is truly a problem to Sybil, and a threat to this country. She then turned to him and then sharply ordered. Earlier this morning a place called Happy Family Park and Zoo had reported a disturbance within their premises. Their den of horses were ransacked. They said none of their horses were stolen, but... Zoo? Den of horses. Kay arranged the pieces and then he realized what the chief was saying. That's where the Ghost Rider had acquired his horse. Correct. The chief inspector grinned and sat on her chair again. Go with Arida. He is being discharged as we speak. Happy Family Park and Zoo. You don't need to push yourself too much, Arida. Kay reminded as the two inspectors walked past the droid barricade surrounding the broken black gate. But I want to investigate the Ghost Rider. Plus, Chief Shimatsuki said that she will have to devote all of the manpower into capturing this vigilante. Right, Sho? The inspector beamed at the enforcer behind him. Sho Hinakawa fixed his messy red hair for a bit and only nodded weakly. Yes, but there's no need to push yourself hard today. He shifted his grey eyes at the tree shrubs on his right. Hinakawa is right. You're not fully healed yet. The woman enforcer on left of Sho said in a cold voice. Arida only cast a relaxed grin at her. Thanks for the reminder, Mao-san. Mao Kisaragi only let out a low sigh. She knew the inspector will ignore their warning soon. Hey, Sho. I don't mean to ask, but, are you an expert in horses? No. Sorry I asked. Arida and Sho stood in front of a pale white horse. The four of them had reached the horse den area. Kay and Mao were talking to the caretaker in one corner. As for the other two, Sho and Arida, they were still inspecting the horses. There were 6 horses in the den, and all of them didn't fit the description. Arida observed the 6 horses resting under the shade of the tree. His thoughts were cut after a horse licked his left cheek. Wow, thanks. You're not a flaming skull horse, right? Arida caressed the mane of the horse, making it lick him more. On Kay's side, the inspector was still interviewing the caretaker, an old man in his 60s. Do you have a horse named Vendetta? Vendetta. The old man grumbled and shrugged. No, but we have Victoria. He then pointed at the horse that Arida was playing with. It didn't look like the one from the video. Inspector, I don't think that's the horse. Mao whispered in a matter-of-fact tone and he silently agreed. They said their thanks to the caretaker and the two went to Arida and Sho. Oi, Arida, don't play with the horses. They might have germs or something. Kay reminded, but Arida only leaned closer and sniffed at the horse's neck, startling everyone. Arida. Kay, this is the horse that the Ghost Rider used. Kay and the two enforcers blinked and peered over him, at the sickly pale horse, then back to Arida. The inspector raised his right hand. Smell it. It's sulfur and brimstone. It's the same smell as the Ghost Rider. Kay leaned over and sniffed at Arida's right hand. Sulfur and brimstone filled his nostrils. You're right. Kay faced the horse with a puzzled look. Could it be he used a hologram to make it look like it was on fire? Actually, no, Sho said and pressed his device on his wrist. I've analyzed the whole video 3 times in a row. I didn't detect any hologram programs on it, as if it's a real deal. Wait a second. Flaming horses and riders don't just appear randomly. That only happens in manga and anime. Manga and anime? Arida rose his right brow at Mao, but then Kay butted in. And yet it happened. It even assaulted Arida and the two enforcers. The group only stood in silence as a cold wind blew through them. The sound that it created was eerie and foreboding. But a sharp sound cut through it and Arida glanced at his commute device. Ah, it's Shin. Arida answered and the analyst Shin came into view. Hey there, Arida, I've got a good news and bad news for you. He grazed at the horses after one of it neighed loudly. Please tell both. Shin took a mouthful of smoke from her cigar and blew it on the air. Apparently, Ghost Rider returned your Dominator. It's already in the analysis lab. Arida and Kay looked at each other, startled by the news. What's the bad news? Kay then asked. Shin sighed dejectedly. It was badly damaged so, it's very likely we won't be able to know where the Ghost Rider brought it. Plus, it's coated with chocolate potato chips. Blast. Almost had him. Apparently, this vigilante wasn't stupid. Kay thought hard while Arida looked at the ground. He returned it? Why would he return it? MWPSB, Analysis Laboratory 1. Chief Shimatsuki glared beyond the airproof glass and watched as a mechanical handle brushed and scanned the stolen Dominator. She had heard the news and it bothered her. So, there's really no way we can know where this Dominator had been, she asked. Shin was standing beside her. The analyst blew her cigar to the air. Yes. When it was discovered, it was wrapped inside a chocolate potato chips bag. The wrapper was made out of aluminum foil, which can block signals and transmitters. So, our vigilante isn't stupid. That's not good. Chief Shimatsuki thought gravely as Arida and Kay observed the Dominator more. I never thought you could do that with potato chip bags of all things. Arida said with amusement to Kay, who glanced at him with a weird look. I'm guessing that our vigilante has military experience. He explained to Arida. The inspector moved closer to the glass and then a light bulb inside of him turned on. Say, Kay, can I use my mental trace on it? Chief Shimatsuki and Kay looked at each other, skeptic of what Arida had asked. Okay, just as long as you will let me pull you immediately if you start talking in a devil tone again. And please don't rotate your head 360 degrees. That will definitely make everyone's psychopasses increase. Chief Shimatsuki said in a mischievous manner, making Arida laugh. Just then, the airproof glass opened as the machine shut down. The analysis was complete and it showed that the Dominator was beyond repair. Arida breathed in and looked at the handle of his Dominator. Time to meet the Ghost Rider again. It was raining hard. Arida slowly opened his eyes and met the familiar grey and smoky world. He was sitting on a tatami floor. The room that he was in was a small, tenement-sized place. A table was in front of him and on his right was a dirty kitchen. A tenement apartment. Wait, does that mean dash? You're here again, you stupid brat. Arida's eyes widened and found himself unable to breathe as a familiar grip lifted him by his neck. The Ghost Rider snarled inches away from his face. The fire around his skull crackled dangerously into small tendrils as if it was always ready to burst into a raging inferno. How many times do I have to tell you not to mental trace me? The Ghost Rider slammed the man's back on the wall, making the human yelp. I'm not afraid of you dash. He finally mouthed the words with a strong voice. The Ghost Rider tilted his head in a questioning manner, then he chuckled, devilishly. Then this is a goodbye. He raised his left hand, revealing a Dominator that quickly transformed into lethal enforcement mode. No, Arida, don't do it, a familiar voice called Arida back to reality. The grey world disappeared and was replaced a familiar bright blue-green light. What the dash? Arida was wide-eyed. His broken Dominator had transformed into lethal enforcement mode and he was pointing it below his chin. It whirled loudly to life as his right index finger pulled the trigger. Somewhere in the Darnet, commute field, dark room. Commute fields were virtual games and chat rooms that resided inside the vast, monitored, internet virtual space of Sybil system. Thousands of people, all over the country, accessed this place to play virtual games or to chat with someone they knew or liked. However, in the deepest part of the commute field, away from the monitoring eyes of Sybil system, lay the Darnet. And just like the internet, it also had commute fields that were downright sketchy and illegal. This virtual space in the Darnet was called Dark Room. In the virtual dark room, there was a round purple table with a mantle. A huge star was etched on the mantle and there are 5 people sitting around it. All of them were wearing a straight, white cloth that covered their entire body, and a white mask, with a number plastered on the surface, covered their faces. A Ghost Rider had just arrived in this world. The person, wearing a white mask with a number 2, began. His voice was that of a man, deep and bellowing. Not just any Ghost Rider, the man on his left, his masks bearing the number 3, cut him, the Ghost Rider. Johnathon Blaze? But wasn't he ousted and killed? The person on the left of number 3, his mask flashed number 4, asked with concern. Clearly you didn't know who ousted him, number 4. The man on the left of number 4 leered his mask. His number, 5, cast over the mask of number 4. Then number 4 clicked his tongue and argued. Then why on earth did you call him? He'll find us and we'll be damned again. Relax. Halfas, got it all under control. Number 5, whose real name was Halfas, declared proudly and it earned him several disapproving grunts. Make sure then. Everyone turned to the last member, the leader of the group. The leader's mask showed his number, 1. He shifted in his seat as his mask leered to Halfas. If you fail, then you know what will happen to you. He ended his words in a threatening way, but number 5 snorted and answered him back, haughtily. Of course, I know. I will just make sure that he will hear me. Besides, I am excited to do battle with Johnathon Blaze, the former king of hell. Elevated highway? No. ######. So that's what happened. Kagami said in a surprised tone to Shin, from her screen, nodded. Yes, Arata almost shot himself unintentionally. It's a good thing his partner, Kei, had stopped him, and boy, you should see Shimatsuki's face. She almost fainted in fear, she said, and let out a light laugh. Kagami grinned and said his goodbye to the analyst before he ended the communication. He sighed and rested his back on his car seat, gliding smoothly along the highway. Arata and Kei, you really make a good duo of inspectors, Akane. He looked over at passenger side where a girl with brown shoulder-length hair and eyes answered him back with a smile. Yes. When I saw their profile, I knew they were perfect for this job. She smiled with gladness and looked out the window. So, what do you think of this vigilante? Do you think he's human? Kagami asked in an inquiring manner. Akane stared at the buildings and the red-orange sunset on the horizon. Vigilantes are somewhat similar to psychopaths. The only difference was that psychopaths choose their victims in a random manner. They often don't create patterns in their crime. Meanwhile, vigilantes, they have specific targets and they follow a pattern. Akane crossed her arms over her chest and resumed. This Ghost Rider, I think he's human. Because, if he was a strange being, why would he let Arata go? And why would he leave an apologetic note when he returned his Dominator to him? Kagami took out a small piece of paper that he acquired before Shin sent the Dominator to the analysis lab. The paper had been taped on the Dominator, and it was a good thing that Shin found it and gave it to him. I get a feeling that MOFA will soon need to work together with MWPSB in capturing this man. Kagami thought before he read the note again. I'm sorry for hurting the inspector and the two enforcers. I don't really mean it. Chapter 4, Case 2-1 Chapter 3. Case 2-1, The Ghost Rider, Part 1. So noisy, the blaring of his alarm clock woke Inspector Arata. Eyebags were under his half-open eyes as he reached and turned his alarm off. He pulled himself, sat straight up and glanced around the garage where he always slept. Yesterday was a close one. He recalled the terrifying events yesterday. The whirling of his very own Dominator that was pointing at him made him shiver slightly. Ghost Rider knows whenever someone tries to invade his mind. He grumbled as his mind wandered in thought. How could he even control me, unless he isn't human after all? He frowned, but quickly jumped from his sofa and smiled. Now then, time to investigate. MWPSB, Unit 1 floor. In the Unit 1 office floor, everyone was busy with their own tasks. Irie and Todoroki were back from the hospital and both were typing on their computers. Todoroki was reviewing the footage over and over, and each time he watched it, he grimaced to what he had suffered. That chain of his, it really came out of his left hand magically. And I can still feel it. He murmured as he rubbed his chest and remembered the pain. Irie, on the other hand, snorted and grumbled. Well, check me out. I got hit by a fireball, he exclaimed while he looked down to his stomach. Mao glanced at him with a concerned yet hard look. I'm glad you weren't blown to smithereens, Irie. Ah, thanks, Mao. I didn't know you'd miss me. Yes, a little bit. Mao answered bluntly, making Irie squawk to her response. Kei, however, was sitting silently in front of his computer. His eyes were focused intently on the drone footage of Ghost Rider, galloping through the river's surface. That horse yesterday was this horse. How was this possible? He was deep in thought, so much that he didn't notice Arata entering and greeting everyone good morning. Hey there, Kei-chan. Kei's thoughts were cut as Arata's relaxed face loomed over him. Ah, Arata. I'm just checking to see if we missed anything yesterday. He paused and his eyes squinted at him. And by the way, yesterday was a close call. Arata shyly chuckled, flustered by the events of yesterday. No need to worry. That won't happen again, he said with guarantee, making Kei frown for a bit. So then, how will we proceed with the investigation today? He then asked him in a firm tone. How to proceed? Arata stared at his friend and then he grinned as a plan formed in his mind. We'll go back to the zoo and investigate the nearby buildings around it. Sho glanced at his computer and then raised his hand. Excuse me, Inspector, but the buildings surrounding the park are temporary tenements for immigrants. Yes, Arata nodded and continued. When I mental traced my Dominator, I saw a room that looks like a tenement unit. A tenement unit. Todoroki tilted his head, questioning the inspector. What does that mean? It means that's where the Ghost Rider reside. Which could also mean that our mysterious, magical, vigilante, is an immigrant, probably a recent one too. Kei spat the word magical in a ridiculing way, making some of the enforcers smirk in amusement. Our reasoning may be full of holes, but we can't leave any stones unturned, Arata said, and the Irie burst from his seat. Yeah, let's start the investigate now. I can't wait to punch him in the guts, he declared, startling Mao, who darted her questioning eyes to him. What do you mean by that? Arata felt his spirit and he only made a nod before he declared. Now then, let's investigate. Tenement apartment building B. Status check, K. Arata stood in front of a staircase inside an apartment building. After the meeting, the whole of Unit 1 had started their investigation. They visited and questioned each immigrant who recently emigrated and entered Japan. They had started a few hours ago, but they hadn't found anything yet. Everything's normal here, Arata. Nothing relevant to our case too. Another dead end. A low grumbling sound reverberated from his insides. That's right. I haven't eaten my lunch yet, he thought, and noticed Irie, sitting on the stairs with a tired look on his face. No luck in this apartment, huh? Irie stated in a cold voice. Yeah, and all of the units looked the same. I thought we'd find something since this tenement block is near to the zoo. Arida said in defeat and clicked his device and looked at his hollow screen. Last floor, Irie, and then we'll move to another. A groan escaped the enforcer's mouth as he stood up and climbed up the stairs. Apartment 1408. In this building's floor, there is only one occupant. Irie double-checked his device as Arida pressed the doorbell. The name of the occupant is Johnathon Blaze, right? Yeah, an American. The conversation between the two was cut as the door opened loudly. The occupant of the room, named Johnathon, peeked his head out and looked at them both with inquisitive eyes. Yes, he said roughly at the two. Johnathon Blaze, right? Can you understand Japanese? Arida asked as the man smiled and nodded. Yes, I can. He answered in a cool manner. The two officers took out and showed their IDs, introducing themselves. My name is Arida Shindo, SID Inspector, and he is Kazumichi Irie, SID Enforcer. We would like to ask you some questions, if it's okay with you. The man scanned their IDs, his blue eyes shifting between them in a studying manner. We would like to ask if you noticed anything strange for the past 2 days. Arida asked as Johnathon glanced to his left, remembering any strange occurrences for the past 2 days, but then cast an apologetic smile. No, nothing except for the park though. The police barricaded them suddenly. Is something wrong, Inspector? Johnathon then noticed the inspector move to his right and began to stand on the tips of his toes. The man found his action weird and he turned to the enforcer who cleared his throat, calling the attention of the inspector. Oi, Arida. Arida stopped and blinked at Johnathon. Sorry, sir. I'm just checking your height. He beamed his grin at him, making the American man chuckle. Just one more question. According to our Sybil database, you're the lone survivor of the immigrant ship, the Aurora, right? Johnathon looked at the ground and his eyes became serious. Yes. Must have been tough, buddy. I'm glad you're safe. The inspector said in a kind tone that startled Johnny. The American couldn't reply to what he said. He was gladdened by his words. That's all. Keep your mind healthy, Jonathan-san. Ah, thanks, Inspector. Johnathon bowed as Arida and Irie walked away. What's with your weird actions, Arida? Irie asked as the two walked down the stairs. Arida was silent for a second and then he stopped. I was trying to smell him. He didn't smell sulfur and brimstone. The inspector put his right hand on his chin. Also, Irie, the second time I found Ghost Rider during my second mental tracing, I saw something other than his room. He turned around and looked at the enforcer. It was a glowing, gold medallion. I was trying to see if Johnathon Blaze was wearing it, but I didn't notice anything on his shirt. His height, however, was the same as the Ghost Rider. Doing those weird things just for a gold medallion and height, Irie whistled in astonishment. He wasn't expecting Arida to do a lot of things in such a short time. So, are we going to arrest him because of his height? The inspector shook his head and pressed his device. No, that's very weak evidence, but I'll keep him in my mind. He scanned his hollow screen and started reading Jonathan's profile again. Heavenly White, despite being a stunt performer and a volunteer soldier for 7 years. He rummaged his mind, but to no avail. He couldn't come up any valid logic to pin Johnny as the mysterious Ghost Rider. Johnny stood silently in front of his bathroom mirror. He had just finished being interviewed by 2 law enforcers and during those minutes, he strongly relaxed himself so his psychopath wouldn't increase. So that's Inspector Arida. Damn, he's sharper than I thought. That sensitive question earlier would put off any people who had suffered through a traumatic incident. Johnny sighed heavily. Good thing Sybil taught me how to relax properly. And I know how to act. He added mentally and smirked proudly at his talent. Now then I must prepare for tonight. His mood changed as he glanced at the broken phone on top of his table. Not yet, later. He thought grimly as he sat on the floor and crossed his legs. Reveal. He whispered and the medallion emerged from his chest. Arida was looking for you. I guess I need to go over my spell casting. Which means I need to recall every demonic spell that I've almost forgotten and recall everything that Strange said to me. Ugh. Johnny had lost count of every spell that he had cast throughout his life as a Ghost Rider. Since he was in constant battle with different demons, he could always cast new spells, but at the same time, he would also forget the old ones. But there's one spell that I like. He smirked in a devilish way and then stood up again. I need a roof. Tenement apartment, building B, rooftop. Johnny sat in the middle of the dirty rooftop with his eyes closed. He was mentally chanting a mantra as his mind traveled deeper within his subconsciousness. Open the treasury of hell, come to me. He minced the words with firmness. His eyebrows connected and twitched as he devoted everything to his concentration. Suddenly, a large ritual circle appeared. It glowed deep blood red before fire burst around it. Wind shifted and swirled harshly around the ritual seal, carrying the fire to the center. The fire then began to fuse and merge, and began to take form into something that Johnny knew so well. Hello there, old friend, ready for a ride? He opened his eyes and grinned hungrily at the sight before him. Shinjuku Abandoned Zone. At night, the streets of Shinjuku Abandoned Zone lit up energetically. Stores lined up and it was filled with life. People walked around the streets in a wild and careless manner since the place wasn't monitored by Sybil's surveillance network. It's kind of cramped here, Johnny thought as he slowly moved along the crowd. He was wearing a normal black jacket with a hood over a white shirt, black pants, and boots. He was also wearing a red Tengo mask over his face. Even though the place didn't have Sybil system surveillance network, he still couldn't risk being exposed. This mask is itchy. He paused and slid into a dark alley between two large buildings. He took a peek and eyed a large building at the end of the street. There were two large men guarding the front door. They were likely armed, considering their right hands were inside their jacket pockets. The door behind them displayed the familiar demonic seal of Halfas. Johnny stood straight by the wall and took a mouthful of air. Ready or not, here I come. The two men by the entrance stood and sternly eyed everyone that passed in front of the building. Their right hands were clutching their guns and both were ready to fire at any threat that came to the building. Their eyes quickly hardened as they saw an approaching figure. The man was in a black jacket and bore a red Tengo mask. So my Mason, Johnny said in a rough way. I have appointment with your boss. The two menacing men looked at each other in confusion, then back to him. Our boss doesn't meet anyone. Beat it, Gaijin. The first man said. Or else we'll beat you up. The second man said. The masked man's head tilted to his right. Oh, okay. How about this? You bring me to Halfas or I'll kill you both, he said in a grave, threatening voice, which startled the two. Why you dash? The first man reacted, but the second man called and stopped him. Wait. The boss just said to bring him in, the second man said while he was holding his earpiece to ear. The masked man shifted his gaze and looked up. He saw a camera on the left corner of the door. So he knows I'm here. The first man clicked his tongue, displeased at the order, and grabbed Johnny by his right shoulder. Come. The first man then pulled him as the second man opened the door to the building. Halfas's office, top floor. In a dimly lit office, sitting behind a sturdy brown desk with both of his feet up, was Halfas. The Chinese American stared at the screen of the small TV sitting on his desk. His right hand held a cigarette between his fingers, and his gray eyes observed Johnny as the two men escorting him suddenly attacked him. Fool, you think I would just let you waltz in here? He laughed in a deep, abyssal way and then glanced to his right. Suo, alert every floor. Prepare for battle. The man named Suo was a tall man with brown skin and a bald head. His black eyes stared at his master before he nodded. And take your partner, Euro, with you? On his left stood man with a similar build to Suo. His head was also bald and had brown skin, similar to his partner. He glanced his black eyes to his master for a second before he followed Suo to the door. Since you two are newbies, might as well show me how you'll fare in this battle against the Ghost Rider. Halfas grinned wickedly as the two closed the door of his office. Just then, he felt the whole building shake slightly. He glanced at the TV monitor again and saw the familiar flaming skull of Ghost Rider. Guess time to say goodbye. Halfas smirked, but it was a sad one. He pulled the drawer on his right and took out a silver handgun. Time to go home, he murmured deeply as he stood up and walked out of his office. 30 minutes ago, Johnny met a corridor that ended at an elevator. The boss will meet you, the first man snarled behind him. But only right after we beat you to a pulp. Gaijin. Johnny turned to his left, but he reacted too late. The second man punched him right on the back of his skull. He fell and the floor hard. His Tengo mask shattered into tiny pieces. Useless. The first man growled and stepped on his back. But then the downed man's hands twitched and moved. The smile of the two men quickly disappeared as Johnny eased and slowly pushed himself up with a loud grunt. That was a very good punch. His voice shifted and changed into a demonic one as the medallion on his chest made a flaming spark. The short blaze ate and melted his skin away, and then he burst into flames. The two men screamed as the raging infernal blast pushed them towards the door behind them. Guilty, ha ha ha. The Ghost Rider laughed maniacally and then turned to the corridor. In an instant, 10 mercenaries suddenly emerged from the elevator and scrambled around the corridor. What the hell is that thing? It's an ONI. Bring some rockets here now. The men were startled and shook as they panicked at the sight of the flaming Ghost Rider. No, I am not an ONI. I am your worst nightmare. The Ghost Rider snarled at them, but the mercenary quickly fired their rifles and guns at him. A rain of bullets hit the Ghost Rider, but he only stood still as the bullets hit and bounced off in his bones. He made a low fiendish chuckle before he started walking. The men panicked even more and were determined to never stop shooting down the flaming being. Incendiary grenade. One of the mercenaries shouted and threw a grenade, but the Ghost Rider caught it with his right hand and threw it behind him towards the door. The grenade exploded and threw the door to the outside street. Fool, do you think fire could stop me? I'll show you a real fire. The Ghost Rider then raised his left hand and took a deep breath before he uttered a spell. Burn. His left hand glowed red-orange and then unleashed a wave of fire. The fire rocketed towards the mercenaries. Their screams of pain and torment echoed loudly, but the Ghost Rider ignored it all. He had seen their sins and they were all guilty to him. Houston, we've got a problem, my awesomeness. He laughed viciously and walked towards the elevator. 8th floor, mezzanine. The Ghost Rider was resting his back on the wall inside the elevator. He was humming the tune coming out from the speakers above him when suddenly the elevator stopped. He grunted and looked up. I'm still far up. He growled in annoyance and grabbed the doors of the elevator. He yanked and pried the door easily only to be thrown back to the wall as hails of bullets coming from a powerful machine gun hit him. Take that. The mercenary outside roared and watched as the flame around the Ghost Rider's skull disappeared. His machine gun, however, stopped after his bullets ran out. Reload dash. But before he finished his word, a gush of fire burned him to dust and melted the machine gun from its stand. Whew, now that's what I call a knockoff. The Ghost Rider stumbled out the elevator and stretched his body, only to stop after he noticed that he wasn't alone. He was in a mezzanine floor, and right in front of him was a large group of 20 mercenaries, all of whom were wielding powerful machine guns. You know, I kinda like your gun dash. Open fire. The mercenary in front shouted and the Ghost Rider swiftly slid on the shadows of a pillar. So many guns, Halfaz is truly here. He laughed deeply and opened both of his hands. Hellfire forgery, hell shotguns. Fire spewed out of his hands and slowly morphed into a pair of shotguns. Hellfire shotguns, one of the weapons he loved, though it was second to his most favorite weapon ever. My turn. The Ghost Rider stood for a moment before he ran out of the shadows and jumped into the air. He landed in front of the mercenary who shouted first and blasted his head away with his right shotgun. 1. The Ghost Rider counted and pointed to his left, shooting his gun at mercenary to mercenary. 2, 3, 4. He beelined to the left, shooting 3 people before he spun and leapt to the air. 5, 6, 7, 8. He fired both of his shotguns in a frenzied way, taking down 4 people in a row. Hey, I'll give you all more. The Ghost Rider jeered as the rain of lead bullets knocked his bones. He let out a battle roar before he pivoted to his right and ran towards a pillar. He used the pillar as leverage and jumped higher into the air. And then he started to spin wildly. He built up his speed above the group and then fired his shotguns. The Ghost Rider laughed as burning lead showered the mercenaries underneath. Each of his bullets pierced and stabbed the group. The screams of his enemies filled the mezzanine floor and they died down after another discharge of the flaming rider's shotguns rang out. Now that's a good exercise. He muttered as he scanned his 2 shotguns, but his ears caught the sound of man's whimper. He turned his head to his right and saw a man sitting with his back on the stairs. His eyes were crying and his pants were soiled with his own urine. The man flinched and clutched his small handgun at the Ghost Rider, who towered over him. This man's name was Rayon. As for his sins, the man's memory flashed in the Ghost Rider's eyes and then he snickered. Innocent. It's your lucky day, punk. The man flinched as the Ghost Rider lifted him up by his collar. Now scram. I got a devil to cook. The man was startled at his reaction, but he quickly bowed at him in thanks and ran. But he's criminally asymptomatic, so he'll end up in a gutter soon. The Ghost Rider let out a laugh again and walked up the stairs. Top floor. Last floor, huh. The Ghost Rider stood in front of a large door. He opened it and peered inside. The desk on the far side was empty and poorly lit by a single desk lamp. He scanned the room with his hardened gaze and found no sign of the demon, Halfaz. Heh, did he escape back? Suddenly, the Ghost Rider was pushed inside the room. A hard kick had landed him on the table. The heck? He quickly stood up and faced his new foes. 2 men had entered and locked the door behind them. They were both large and their fists were ready to defy him. The Ghost Rider growled and raised his shotguns, but the 2 quickly dived in. Suo, on left of the Ghost Rider, raised his right hand in a karate chop while Uro, on the right, raised his left hand on the same form. Both of them hit the Ghost Rider's wrist synchronously with force, and dislodged his shotguns. Fuck dash, the 2 weren't finished yet. They both uppercut him, which detached his head from his body. The Ghost Rider's skull hit the ceiling and landed on the table, the flames around disappeared and his headless body limply fell to the floor with a loud thud. Holy, he's really burning, Uro said with a tense voice. He pressed his device on his wrist, deactivating his hologram disguise. Uro's bald head disappeared and was replaced with black hair. His skin became white and his black eyes stared at the downed burning rider. Indeed, Shugo. Supposedly, the MWPSB are the ones in charge of taking care of him, Jinoza said, underneath his disguise as Suo, which he deactivated immediately. In any case, we must arrest Halfaz first. Contact the MWPSB, Shugo. We might have, possibly, killed the Ghost Rider. I will dash. What do you think you're doing? A menacing voice surprised the 2. Shugo and Jinoza was about to attack when they were both whipped by chains that snaked out of the headless body. The Ghost Rider slowly stood up, his flames burst from the inside, and grabbed his skeleton head. What the dash? Shugo couldn't understand what just happened. He and Jinoza had decapitated him with their punch. Just shoot him. Don't let him go near Halfaz dash. Jinoza couldn't finish his orders as the Ghost Rider swooped forward, punched them both on their abdomens. Their bodies smashed the door and landed hard on the corridor outside. Damn it. Jinoza's body throbbed, his muscles tensing and aching to the injuries on his back and abdomen. He coughed and blood spilled from his mouth. Sadly, I can't kill you both, Nobuchika Jinoza and Teppei Shugo. He knew our names? Jinoza looked up at the hollow eyes of Ghost Rider, and frowned in anguish. Since you 2 know Kagami and Frederica, would you tell them this? He squatted down and whispered hoarsely. Never ever interrupt my hunting, or I'll hunt you, got it? The downed man nodded to him and the Ghost Rider stood up again. He knew Kagami and Frederica. How? His mind worked furiously, but to no avail. He only watched, bitterly, as the burning rider walked away. Chapter 5, Case 2-2 Chapter 4. Case 2-2, The Ghost Rider, Part 2. Shinjuku Abandoned Zone, Halfaz's Weapon Tower. And now for the boss. The Ghost Rider thought in anticipation as he opened the door that led to the rooftop. The door swung noisily and the cold wind brushed hard against him. Flames around his head grew larger as the wind fuels it. He scanned the area, letting the lights of the abandoned zone dance and surround him. And then he stopped after he saw his target. Halfaz stood a couple of meters away from him. He was wearing a grey muscle shirt and camouflage pants. His white hair moved as the wind brushed past him and his grey eyes stared at the Ghost Rider with deadly intent. A pretentious smirk was etched across his hardened face. "Hello there, Ghost Rider. Or should I call you by your real name?" he said in an arrogant tone. The Ghost Rider growled at him and took a step forward. "Reveal your true form, Halfas," he threatened. His hellfire shotguns materialized in his hands. "Ugh, fine, your majesty." Halfas bowed in a mocking way and then a sharp line appeared on his face. The cracks lined up and crawled all throughout his body. Halfas's human skin crumbled as he slowly grew larger. His human face morphed into a beak, his grey eyes became sharper and much rounder. His muscles made a sickening sound of snapping apart as he grew, black fur emerged and replaced his human skin. Feathery black wings spread wide on his back and the Devil Stork towered over the Ghost Rider. Halfas, according to what the Ghost Rider had heard from other demons in hell, was a stork with black feathery wings. He was famous for his sadistic nature, but he was also famous for one other thing. "Now then, you like what you see?" His voice became hoarse as if it came from the deepest part of the earth. Johnny tilted his head, judging the 7-foot devil, and then shrugged his shoulders, muttering in an unamazed way. "Meh, storks like you aren't appetizing enough." Halfas roared loudly like an eagle and moved his wings with tremendous force. Rocket launchers suddenly appeared and hovered behind him. At this instant, the Ghost Rider remembered the other rumors that he had heard. Halfas was Mephistopheles' weapons supplier and manufacturer for his underlings. He loved collecting and making weapons. "Oh, shit." The Ghost Rider cursed grimly as Halfas waved his right hand. The rocket launchers burst and flew towards him. The Ghost Rider ran to the sides, avoiding each of the rockets. Explosions rocked the whole building, debris falling to the sidewalk below. "Crap." The Ghost Rider jumped and rolled on the ground towards a pillar. Okay, backup plan, but before he could think more, the pillar exploded and the force of the explosion propelled him towards the edge of the building. "Damn it!" He flicked his right hand, summoning his chain which then attached to the building's ledge as his body flew over the edge and dangled dangerously high from the ground. TCH lucky shot dash. "Do you need a hand?" The Ghost Rider was startled after he felt his chain tugged. He looked up and saw Halfas holding the other end of his chain and he was smiling wickedly, like the former king of hell was nothing but delicious bird food. The Ghost Rider growled and activated one of his spells. Flames engulfed the chains but nothing happened. "Huh? I am Halfas, the weapon master of hell. I know every weapon and their weaknesses, and that includes your hellfire chains." Halfas laughed and showed his hands. They were both wrapped in gloves made out of chainmail and imbued with hell magic, protecting him from his hellfire. He then swung the chain playfully like it was a yo-yo. The Ghost Rider, angered by what Halfas was doing to him, landed his foot on the walls of the building and then forcefully pushed himself. He pitched and rolled on midair, but the Great Earl of Hell had predicted such action. He pulled the man with force towards him and punched him right into his guts. Ugh dash. The burning rider let out a strained cry and fell to the floor. But the Devil Count wasn't finished yet. He quickly bent and wrapped the chains around the Ghost Rider's neck. "Going up," he said energetically before thrusting upward. The demonic Count soared up, dragging the former king of hell with him. "Damn it," the Ghost Rider cursed and stretched out his left hand, moving his index finger in a pattern, but cried out as Halfas tugged him hard. "Now going down." Halfas screamed in pleasure as he swooped down towards the city. The Ghost Rider roared in defiance. The streets of the city below them was filled with moving vehicles. The demonic Count then, before reaching the ground, veered and leveled above a road. The Ghost Rider smacked the pavement with a loud bang. "Let's have a drive-by, shall we?" Halfas sneered and flew speedily while still tugging the Ghost Rider. Vehicles careened and stopped as the vengeful ghost crashed and smashed into them like they were bumper cars. "Shit dash." The Ghost Rider groaned and tightened his right hand around the chain. Pain pierced his body and it slowly numbed him. "Must not let go," he screamed mentally as he crashed on the windshield of a bus, towed again, and then slammed right into a hood of a car. The Devil Count checked behind him and snickered at the sorry state of the Ghost Rider. "Ha, the rumors were true. Johnny Blaze is no longer the strongest Ghost Rider. Trapping him is gonna be easy." He smiled from ear to ear at the thought. MWPSB, lobby floor. Today's investigation was a bust. Arita thought heavily. He was walking across the lobby of the Public Safety Bureau building. He made a heavy yawn as he glanced at the large mantle clock on the wall to his left. The night was already deep. The moon was already high in the sky. Maybe, I need to look at these in another angle. Today's investigation didn't give him answers. Theories and more questions only formed in his mind, which displeased Arita more. He was disturbed when his device rang. It was Kay and he immediately answered. "Oh hey, Kay just got checked out dash. Arita, we have an emergency. The chief is deploying all of the available inspectors and enforcers right now," Kay said in a rush, which confused the inspector. "What the hell's happening?" "Kay, what dash?" He was about to ask, but his partner quickly answered him. "The Ghost Rider has appeared. He's in Shibuya Crossing." Arita stopped his breath for a moment. The Ghost Rider was on the move. He wasn't expecting him to appear right now. "I'm coming with you," he said and dashed immediately towards the elevator. Shibuya Crossing. Halfas soared speedily above the Tokyo's famous crossing, the Shibuya Crossing. The Shibuya Crossing was one of the busiest crossing intersections in the world. Hundreds, if not thousands of people crossed the street every day. and tonight was no exception. Ain't this a beauty Ghost Rider? Halfaz said in amazement. He always crossed here every time before, but this was the first time that he saw the place from high altitude. The view was stunning and breathtaking. The Ghost Rider below him grasped around the chains tightly. Flames sprouted and crawled towards the other end. But again, nothing happened. Halfaz's magic chainmail gloves deflected his hellfire. Halfaz sighed to the Ghost Rider's poor attack. How rude of me. You wanna look at the Shibuya crossing up close, right? He let out a chuckle before diving down. I'm going to hit dash. The Ghost Rider rotated his body so that his back would absorb the impact. He landed on the middle of the intersection with a loud smack. A crater was formed underneath him, and the flames around his skull died down. The busy crowd suddenly stopped as everyone looked at him. His sudden appearance had made everyone stand still in shock. Ugh! A low painful moan escaped from the Ghost Rider's teeth. Soreness ate his bones, which slowly turned numb as he tried to move. Fucking hell! He then thrust his upper body up and rotated his shoulders, groaning about his injured back. The flames around his skull returned together with his sense of hearing, which then began to pick up loud and horrified screams. Huh? Oh right, I crash-landed, he remembered, momentarily, and looked around. The people around the intersection ran like spooked mice. A lot of them sprinted away from the creepy-looking Ghost Rider while most of them were gathered on the sidewalk, creating a large encirclement in the intersection. Now I'm noticed, he said in amusement, after seeing a lot of them were hovering their phones, taking pictures or recording videos of him. Make sure that I'll look good on those The chains around the Ghost Rider's neck jerked him up, making him yelp. He looked begrudgingly at Halfaz. He had completely forgotten that he was still tied to him. HOH, now the whole world knows about you, Ghost Rider, perhaps you would like to say hello. Halfaz hovered in midair, ignoring the frightened crowd and their phone cameras below. The Ghost Rider looked down to the ground, seemingly in deep thought, and then a low chuckle poured out his mouth. He's laughing. A foreboding feeling formed inside the Devil Count. He tightened his hands around the chains, startled from the man's unexpected reaction. The Ghost Rider's chuckle became a maddened cackle before he stopped and flashed his right index finger at him. Fool, you think you got me just because you tied my own mystical chains around my neck. He stared at him and snickered as Halfaz's face turned into an ugly irate frown, clearly clueless to what would happen next. You know, Halfaz, my hellfire chains are just one of my favorite weapons. Halfaz's eyes then widened in a doom realization. I haven't seen his motorcycle. Wait, where's your fiendish motorcycle dash? And, like it was on cue, Halfaz was suddenly shoved to the ground. His body smacked hard on the pavement as the Ghost Rider's motorcycle hit his back squarely. Hello, my old friend. The Ghost rasped the words lavishly as his bike responded by revving its engines. The Ghost Rider's bike was absolutely nothing of this world. It was all colored black. Its headlight was a skull and lights were coming out of its socket as if it was its own eyes. But the most amazing detail was its wheels, both were on fire. Halfaz let out an agonizing cry as the wheels grinded his skin and muscles, dislocating both of his wings. The motorcycle moved and maneuvered beside the Ghost Rider. How dash? I planned it all from the very beginning. The chain slithered out of the Count's hand and snaked towards the Ghost Rider's chest and left shoulder. I know you, Halfaz. You love to torture your victims like their playthings. Truly you're Mephisto's henchman. You love flying and being a show-off. He then walked slowly towards the downed devil and towered over him. All I need is, for you to put me on the ground so that I could call my loyal stead, he said with a raspy, gladdened, deep voice. Now, let's have a drive-by, shall we? He yanked his chains again and it speedily crawled and wrapped around Halfaz. The poor devil cried in a helpless manner as the Ghost Rider moved and sat on his bike. The flames around the wheels shoot out, welcoming his master's presence. He attached the other end of his chain on the back of his bike, revved up the engines, but stopped after he noticed a small boy on his right standing on the sidewalk with his phone pointing at him, mouth opened in awe and shock. He stared at him for a moment before he pointed his bony right index finger at his camera. Sybil system sucks. He laughed manically as the boy smiled happily before he revved his engines and took off, dragging the chained up Halfaz, who began to scream for his life. Elevated highway no ######. Kay swerved madly to the right as Arita pressed his device and talked to Shin on the other end. Shin-san, is our drones picking him up? Wait a second, he just entered the elevated highway no #####. Shin dictated. She looked through the drone camera and then was startled. He's right behind you, and he seems to be dragging something dash. Whoa, Kay shouted as his car shook. The Ghost Rider shot past on their left. The engines of his hell cycle roared loudly as the wheels throttled him forward, leaving a burning trace on the pavement. Is that dash? Yes, that's him, and he's dragging something, Kay said in anger. He pressed his device and called Shin again. Try to block him, send at least 50 droid blockers, he ordered as the analyst replied. Sybil had done that. The highway is now blocked. Arita looked behind him and saw the police wagon trailing them. He pressed his device and called one of the enforcers. Are you guys okay back there? He asked as Irie boomed into his device's speaker. Of course, we are. All four of us are excited to bring him down. No, you're the only one who's excited, Mao said in a matter-of-fact tone. Arita grinned at the enforcer's riled-up spirits. Okay, a short briefing. Capture Ghost Rider alive, he ordered, and the whole Unit 1 enforcers answered him back. Yes sir. The Ghost Rider thundered down the highway. The flames on his head moved and swayed violently, the air fueling it more. Behind him, Halfaz stopped his screaming a long time ago. His eyes were closed and his mouth only let out several sharp gasps and grunts of agony. No, stop, please. Halfaz tried to speak the words but his pleas had fallen in deaf ears. No, why would I stop? You're a demon, you don't deserve this world. The Ghost Rider thought coldly. And then he pulled his brakes, his hell cycle rattling and stopping. TCH really? His eyes focused and zoomed in front. 100 meters away from him was a row of droid blocker. The Sybil system must have detected him and it pissed him off. He spat an ember on the ground before he pulled the throttle of his hell cycle and took off. Halt, in the name of the law, the droid blockers announced, but it only made the Ghost Rider rev his engines more. Halt, in the name of the dash. The Ghost Rider slammed into the first row, metallic sounds of clashing reverberated around the place. He then smashed his way through rows and rows of droid blockers like they were nothing but bowling pins. All were trying to stop him, but the Ghost Rider only flipped his left third finger and cackled madly. Strike bitches. He continued and boosted more speed towards the end of the highway. He what? Kay exclaimed loudly as Shen, on the other end of the line, reported to him. He smashed right through them. He has now exited the highway. She typed into her computer and tried to predict the Ghost Rider's route. It looks like he's going to the North Pier. North Pier, Arida thought as he pressed his device and looked through the maps. Is that place abandoned? Yes. Shen answered as the inspector closed his device and turned to Kay. We got him. The road ends there. He said in pure determination and looked in front. I'll get you this time, Ghost Rider. North Pier, abandoned warehouse. The Ghost Rider burst right through the metallic door of an abandoned warehouse. The engines of his hell cycle resounded through the walls of the building. He pulled his brakes, careening to a stop, and stepped down. The North Pier was facing the opened Pacific Ocean. The lights from the city glowed dimly in the darkened ocean. This was a perfect place to interrogate Halfaz. He looked behind him and saw the Devil Count moving his shoulders around his chain. He was weak and the Ghost Rider detected it. Ugh. Halfaz moaned in agony as the chains slowly unfurled on his body. The chains retreated on the Ghost Rider's right wrist and the man walked towards him. The devil gasped in ache as the man took him by his neck and started dragging him across the dirty floor. Now, let's begin our date. The Ghost Rider snarled and lifted the poor devil with his right hand before slamming him into the wall. Halfaz let out a strained choke and looked down at the Ghost Rider. The other counts, are they also here? Ghost Rider began as the devil slowly retreated to his human form. He shouted in pain again as the Ghost Rider slammed him into the wall again. I didn't tell you to change. PL please, I am weak already. Halfaz begged and held on to the man's right forearm. I'll tell you everything, just put me down first. He added while his voice shouted poorly. The ghost saw that he was telling the truth. He let him go and Halfaz grasped loudly, breathing the dirty air around him. Silence loomed between the two and it unnerved the Ghost Rider more. He was about to roar when the devil looked at him again. This time, his eyes were sad and his lips formed a desperate smile. I am sure you have seen it in me, that I don't really have any intention to kill you. The Ghost Rider paused and tilted his skull. He was puzzled to his words. That's true though, but... He had seen his intentions already and it puzzled him, but Halfaz was a devil. And devils were always liars and bad. He snorted in disbelief. Bullshit. I don't need you to believe in me. The MWPSB is going to arrive here any minute, so please listen to my final words. The Ghost Rider clicked his teeth. He wanted to finish him off, and yet deep inside of him, curiosity of his last plea made him unable to do so. The MWPSB will arrive here in 15 minutes. Fine, speak. The Ghost Rider crouched down and forged another shotgun in his left hand. He then pointed it at the devil's head. Halfaz looked at him, making sure that he would listen, and then made a mournful smile. All 5 of us counts escaped hell after you defeated Mephisto. In a melancholic way, Halfaz spoke as he looked to his right towards the open ocean. But we knew immediately that you'd hunt us down because we swore our allegiance to Mephisto. That allegiance was a lie, it was born out of fear. Mephistopheles had tortured us endlessly so we would yield to him. Halfaz closed his eyes and his hellish memories played. The Ghost Rider was also watching his memories, but he didn't react to it. When you defeated him, it was a miracle to us. We escaped hell and here we lived as humans, for 20 years. He slowly shifted his dying grey eyes and stared at the Ghost Rider. It feels nice to live like humans. I thought they were useless, but after I got the taste of their life, I began to regret belittling them. Halfaz's smile changed to serene and he glanced down to the ground, reminiscing his human life. I never ate nor possessed any humans after I came here. Though there were times that I'd done something bad, but those are just situations where my survival or disguise was threatened. Those are my only sins in this world. He looked up again to the Ghost Rider. The man hadn't moved his shotgun out of his face, but Halfaz saw his left index finger was not on the trigger. I, indeed, sold weapons of mass destruction, but during those times I also asked my buyers not to proceed into their heinous plans. I was nicknamed Angelic Mercenary because of my naive attitude. He let out a low-keen chuckle and then coughed blood out of his mouth. The crime that you stopped on the Oda Bridge. It was planned by that rookie member of mine. It was never my plan. I knew that they'd be caught by the MOFA and I'd let them to be captured. He glanced back again at the ocean and made a light, sad, laugh. I fell in love with someone, and then, for the first time, I also experienced my heart being broken. I met a lot of wonderful people and the same time, a lot of worst ones. I made friends that I adore and then enemies that I hate. The humans are indeed sinful and selfish, and they aren't. Halfaz wheezed hard, his lungs slowly being filling with his own blood. Death was staring right into his face. 20 years and I don't regret it. I love this city, therefore I will accept my death, just as long as you're the one who's going to do it. The Devil Count moved his right hand and touched the Ghost Rider's shotgun. What is this? All throughout the minute, the Ghost Rider was in disbelief to every word that Halfaz had said. Even though he kept on activating his ability to read souls, the results infuriated him more. Halfaz was still a devil, with an innocent soul. He stood up and walked in a circle, temper rising as his judgment blurred into nothingness. God damn it, what the hell? This could be a trick, you're tricking me, aren't you? He charged and shoved the shotgun at his head. You're a demon? You deserve to be in hell. Your death through my judgment should be an everlasting cruel punishment, not some kind of shitty, cheesy, salvation. He roared in fury. Hatred screamed into his ember eyes. But Halfaz only sat motionless, his eyes only staring right through him and his calm smile still on his face. To die by the hands of the Ghost Rider, the avatar of the spirit of vengeance, is a salvation to some demons. Shut up. I am not your salvation. I will never be. Ghost Rider hit Halfaz's head with the butt of his shotgun and then he pointed it at him again. He wanted to end him now, but he couldn't pull the trigger. Emotions swirled violently inside him. It made his chest feel uncomfortably heavy. Move, press the trigger. Why won't you press the trigger? You're a Ghost Rider, right? You condemn the sinful and bring the rampaging demons back to hell, right? So why won't you now dash? I'll help you. The Ghost Rider's raging thoughts were cut as he felt Halfaz's right hand grab his left again. The devil's right thumb was above his left index finger. He lowered his shotgun right into his chest and cast his one final tranquil smile. Thank you, for listening to me, he said with a gladdened tone and then pushed the trigger. A single shot rang out. Wah what dash. His mind was still lost and everything happened so fast that he couldn't react on time. He quickly stood up and stepped back. Halfaz was lying motionless on the ground, eyes still open and his face still showing his last smile. What the hell? He roared in frustration and threw his shotgun on the floor. He was so lost as to what happened. A devil had tried to trap him just so he could talk about his pathetic life and then he was gladdened that he would be killed by him. No demon had ever showed this kind of reaction to him. The mixed-up situation stirred something inside the Ghost Rider. He kneeled and grasped the air, hard. Why? His chest ached painfully as his heart, wrapped around in a web of flaming cage, beat furiously when a familiar emotion emerged from within his deep dark mind. This feeling, it's dash. But before he could fully remember it, the sound of a police siren echoed in front of him. Lights coming from the police car and police droids cast over him. And then a familiar voice boomed and filled his ears. Stay where you are, Ghost Rider. The Ghost Rider slowly shifted his eyes and looked straight ahead. The aloof, goofy inspector, Arida, was standing beside a police car, but he wasn't alone. 20 or more so inspectors and their enforcers were encircling him now. Their dominators were lit and were aimed at him. True to what he expected, the whole MWPSB had just trapped him. Why is he kneeling? Arida questioned the state of the Ghost Rider who then slowly shifted his head to scan everyone. Oh, the whole MWPSB is here, huh? Wow. The Ghost Rider whistled in appraisal, completely forgetting his earlier ordeal. Heh, like the stunt I showed to you, Inspector Goofy. The inspector clicked his tongue, displeasure to what Ghost Rider said, and trailed the vigilante, who stood up. You better stay down, you monster. Kay barked the order, but the Ghost Rider stared his uninterested eyes at him. And then he called Arida. Say, Inspector Goofy. My name is Arida. Arida protested mentally, but instead he just let out a disappointed sigh. What is it? Despite discovering the reason of your father's suicide, which is the reason why you became an inspector, why are you still an inspector? Arida's hand shook. How did he know that? Just how why on earth would you care, you crazy bastard? Kay roared back as his dominator activated and scanned the Ghost Rider. Warning, unidentified biological being detected. Target is not legible for enforcement. Trigger is locking. I made sure my dominator was fixed. Kay protested as the enforcer show, who was standing beside him, exclaimed. Sybil is unable to judge, Inspector. I know that. Hey, Arida. He called again as the whole group winced in terror. Answer me, please. The inspector was puzzled by his tone. He had detected sadness hidden behind his hellish voice. The inspector then lowered his dominator and answered. The Ghost Rider could only read his lips, because the whirling sound of a drone helicopter flying above him drowned the inspector's words. He only tilted his head and the flames around his skull burst up. Huh? What a loser you are then, he said mockingly as Arida frowned. You asked me and then you dash. Get down. Kay suddenly pulled Arida to the ground, a hellish sound drumming loudly above them. The Ghost Rider's hell cycle revved up a police car and landed hard on the ground, surprising everyone. It then moved in a circular pattern, its wheels throwing dirt and sand at the inspectors and enforcers, blinding them temporarily. Shit, he'll escape. Arida shouted as he put his hands over his face, but then he caught a glimpse of the Phantom Rider. The Ghost Rider sat down and then looked back at him. See you later, Inspector Hardy, and Nancy. Wadash. Arida was confused, but before he could ask, the hell cycle blasted away. Fool, he's driving towards the ocean. Kay answered angrily and took off. Arida immediately followed as they both ran as fast as they could. They both watched in anticipation as the Ghost Rider reached the end of the pier. They were both going to capture him if he crashed hard into the water. But then the unexpected happened. The Ghost Rider jumped and continued running on the surface of the sea. What the fuck? Kay and Arida exclaimed in shock as they watched the Ghost Rider thunder across the sea, his loud, lunatic cackle reverberating everywhere. That's impossible. Kay called in dubiety. That's impossible, he called again, this time his tone filled with raging fury. Arida, however, stood silence. Ghost Rider, who are you really? He had heard a lot of crazy people laughing madly before, but the cackle of the ghost vigilante, despite being loud, was lonely and filled with bitterness. MWPSB, Bureau Chief's Office. Shizuka Homura watched intently at the drone footage playing on his computer. He followed the Ghost Rider as it rode across the Tokyo Bay. His right finger tapped lightly on the table, and then he clicked his tongue in irate. So, he got away. The footage stopped and the bureau chief rested his head on his seat, closing his eyes. After all this time, he opened his enraged eyes suddenly and, after a second, he muttered softly and gently, "Son of a bitch." For a long time, as long Homura could recall, he had never uttered any curse words before. He had heard them, but he never had the guts to say it out loud. This would be his first time.